So why is all of this important, or should it be important to you as a leader? Well, because anytime you, as a leader, try to implement any changes, either in your own life, with your team, or with your organization, as we have mentioned, there's going to be this natural resistance. So when we see organizations that are trying to put a change into place, that change either takes way too long to implement or in some cases fails in its original intent. When we go back and we do the post-mortem and take a look at what really happened, there are two things that we found that are generally missing. Two things. One, when the change is announced, we the organizations and the leaders fail to announce a transition plan. So a plan to go from the as-is state, the way it is today, to the to-be state, the way we want it to be tomorrow, and how are we going to get there? No transition plan, that's number one. And number two, there's no communication plan with the organization. So think about it, if you're in the organization and you get hit with a change that's going to be a big change that you have to deal with, and there's absence of information, what are you going to do? You're going to make up the worst possible cases so you could start to think about how would you deal with those cases if they ever happen, because you have to survive. Maybe not survive with that organization, but an animal, your number one drive is to survive, to stay alive. And so that whole thing starts to kick in and it starts to affect the thinking. So that's why this whole idea of change management and how do you manage the change becomes very, very crucial in moving forward. So let's take a look at a couple of types of changes that are going to be implemented by you personally or by your organization. There are three kinds of changes that we want to talk about today. So the first one is evolutionary change. So let's think about this whole momentum and the, a pendulum. Momentum is a great pendulum, is a great metaphor to use when you're talking about change. It's moving in one direction, and now you want to stop that from moving in that direction. So even though you try to stop it, it's going to continue to move for a little while before it reaches critical mass where you could now start to push it back the other way. You have to plan for that. You have to know that that's coming. So the very first kind of change that people make is called evolutionary change. And evolutionary change is probably the easiest change for any of us to deal with. So that's taking something that we currently have and making it incrementally better. Those are slight changes. You take whatever it is, let's say that you're able to process something as an example in 10 days, and you're leading the organization, you say, look, I want to get that processing knocked down to 8 days. Let's re-engineer our systems, our procedures, our processes to be able to do that. And we want to be able to pick up some productivity, some efficiency, some effectiveness here. One type of the change. So we're all used to that kind of a change. A second kind of change is revolutionary change. So this is like a step change. So something has happened and now we need to make a change in an organization to either get our status back in the industry or the market that we're currently in, or to catch up with competition. They've introduced something that, we know we can get there because we saw this one coming, but now we need to actually take the action to get there. So a great example of this might be an organization who might have been an industry leader for a number of years. And even though they had a product or service that placed them at the head of the industry that everybody was targeting, now competition has caught up to them. Right? So what happens is, instead of this being the height, the leader, and now everybody's up to here, guess what happens? Everybody comes down. And an indicator of this is where you can see yourself now as a me too in the market, where you're offering the same product and services as everybody else, little distinction between them, nothing that really sets you apart. And so now you may be thinking, look, I want to be the industry leader here. I want to leapfrog everybody else and get out there. Well, if you're going to do that, obviously you have to put teams of people together to start to investigate that. What are the best practices? How do we come up with the next practices? What would that look like? You have to introduce the change to your organization. Remember, there will be resistance, right? You have to have a communication plan, a transition plan, a change management plan to be able to shift the way you're currently doing business to the way you need to do business going forward. All of this should be able to happen to most of you. There's a third kind of change, though, that you cannot predict. You just cannot see it coming. And it's called chaotic change. And that's where something so devastating comes out of nowhere that it takes your breath away. Here's an example from business. Imagine for a minute that you're the CEO of Hewlett-Packard or Dell or another computer manufacturer on the day Apple announces the iPad. Wait a minute. What? They just created a whole new market space. And when you think, I mean, you didn't see it coming. Now, here's the neat part. Apple didn't invent the iPad from soup to nuts. The concepts have been around for 15 years, but either technology wasn't there or people couldn't package it right, they couldn't bring it together. The Apple people were able to do that. They used their creativity, their innovativeness, and they found a way to make it work. And so they scooped everybody. They had literally created new market space. So what happens is now, if you take a look at it, everybody's got some kind of tablet, is what they're calling it now, tablet. Even though the name that most people use when they see a tablet is, is that an iPad? Well, that happens as well. And you all know that, many examples of that. That's chaotic change. Let me give you another kind of chaotic change. Another kind of chaotic change is you're working for an organization and you guys are doing really well. And I'm going to use the example of Mobile Oil because we were doing really well. We were killing it in the marketplace. We were walking around, we were getting really cocky, we were getting full of ourselves, we're cleaning competition's clock, we're clawing away business and margins and market share from our competition, and we are hot, right? So, all right, who are we going to buy? And then, we threw out almost every oil company name you could think of, because we were getting so full of ourselves we thought we could buy anybody. And then the announcement comes. Exxon and Mobil are about to merge. What? I mean, Exxon was our biggest competitor. With Mobil, there were people who laid awake at night thinking about how they could take advantage of Exxon and claw business away from them. And now we're merging with them. And so it was like a stupefied look. You walked into a conference room and they said, yes, the name of the new company will be called ExxonMobil, the name that it is today. Somebody in the room said, yeah, but do you know what the real new name of the company is? Everybody kind of looked at him and he said, Exxon. Because they own 70% of the assets. So we knew that their culture was going to survive. And we were going to be put together, and we had to find a way to put it together. Now, here's the neat part about that. That was absolutely chaotic change. And both entities coming together created one of the most well-run companies that exists in the marketplace today anywhere in the world. It's a terrific company. A terrific company. They don't operate by what the law says you have to operate by. They operate by the intent of the law. So if a law comes up and it says you need to move from here to here, they say, okay, that's the law, but the intent of the law is really to go here. We're going here. Well, that's going to cost us all this extra money and all this time. We're going here. Flawless execution is something they pride themselves on. Flawless execution. So as a leader in that organization, this is what you might find interesting. If you have your numbers that you have to meet as a leader for your function, your department, your segment of the world, your portfolio, and if there's a catastrophe that happens someplace around the world, or something totally chaotic and unforeseen, an act of God happens that doesn't allow you to make the numbers, they completely understand that. Completely understand that. However, if you as a leader commit to a budget, or if you and you don't make it, or if you as a leader have an auditor come in and have some internal control weaknesses, that's on your watch. And that's when you get scrutinized. Think about that. How many organizations take that approach? That's a fantastic approach. Fantastic approach. But they live by the letter of the law and the intent of the law. Very, very important when moving forward. So what we wanted to do in this particular segment is you're going to run into those kind of changes. You're going to initiate a lot of evolutionary changes. As a leader, you may even implement some revolutionary changes or come up with those revolutionary changes. When the chaotic changes come, you have to be prepared. The higher you go in the organization, the more of those you're likely to run into. And I'll just give you one last example of a chaotic change. Think about 9/11. See, when there's a chaotic change coming, somebody knows it's coming. Not many. Conventional wisdom is never going to happen to us. That can't happen here. Get the hell out of here. There's no way that would happen. You hear the detractors to somebody who's waving the red flags, but somebody knows it's happening. As a leader, you need to be mindful enough to at least investigate those situations to try to mitigate these catastrophes from happening before they actually occur, so you don't have to play catch up. So this particular module, what we wanted you to get out of it was, obviously we wanted to talk about the growth curve and the pivot points that you're going to hit along the way. We wanted to talk about the laws of motion by Newton so that you understood that as things are moving in a direction, just because you say things should change doesn't mean they are going to change, and there will be resistance to those changes. And then we also wanted to introduce you to the three types of changes that you as a leader will be dealing with: evolutionary, revolutionary, and chaotic. Now in the next segment, we're going to talk about when that resistance comes to the change, what does it look like and how can you predict it? And then in forward modules, we're going to talk about, go even a little more depth into some of the pieces of that so that you will be able to predict with accuracy what's going to happen and know the way out. We want to show you the way out before you fall in the soup. This is Myron Radio, over and